Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the first edition of the off-season hurricane outlook and discussion for April 2nd, 2020. This recorded around 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Don't have a whole lot to talk about today since this is the very first installment, but we'll go ahead and dive straight into it. This was the sea surface temperature anomalies for March 30th of 2020. You do notice that the El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, or basically this area right over here, in the Nino 3.4 region is what it's called. This area right in about here is the Nino 3.4 region of the Pacific, and we do notice that there is a little bit of warming, but not really anything major. You do notice this large plume of colder anomalies here, and stacked up to today's forecast, you do notice a little bit of these subtle cooling across this region. And this will continue to overspread this area throughout the next coming weeks and months, I do believe so. You do also notice this very cold area of anomalies off the California coast, even extending really through and past Hawaii. Let's get a better color here. You do notice this large, expansive cool area, several cool pockets showing up here, and this is very indicative that there is no significant warming across this region right through here. So that does promote less wind shear across the Atlantic Basin. Obviously, we'll get to the wind shear maps here in just a second. But also notice this is, as of today, this is the updated sea surface temperatures for today, April 2nd of 2020. You do notice that we do have this large, expansive warm pool in the main development region, which is roughly located about here. This is the main development region of the Atlantic. Actually, probably just slide that a tad bit south right there. And you do notice that this large, expansive area of warmer than normal anomalies, somewhere up in the probably about degree to degree and a half, even in some cases above 2 degrees above the long-term average. You can also see the Gulf of Mexico here is baking in that warm temperature, right, of course, the shelf waters from Florida all the way down through Texas and Louisiana, the Florida Panhandle, and the Peninsula. Of course, the Gulf of Mexico is always going to be supported for intense tropical cyclones pretty much by the time hurricane season rolls around. So the Gulf of Mexico is always going to support really strong tropical cyclones. But for the most part, again, we're watching this area, and right now it's running above the long-term average by a whole basin-wide, probably about a degree to degree and a half above the long-term average. Even if you were to use generally, you could be generous and say, or you could be conservative and say even a half a degree above the long-term average, which would still very well put us in a favorable position if this continues for a very potent hurricane season. Colorado State University, in fact, by Dr. Phil Klockspot, he just released his update today for April 2nd, his first forecast, actually, not an update, but the first forecast is going for an above-average hurricane season with 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes compared to the long-term 12, 4, and 2. So also the entire U.S. coastline with a 69% chance of getting hit, and the Florida Peninsula with a above-average 45% chance. Again, these are really hard to depict because there's not a whole lot that we can really determine and base it from there, but I will say this. If we can get a really strong Atlantic high ridge this time of year with the above normal conditions out here, it is quite possible that any tropical waves come off would be suppressed and not turn out to sea. Again, we are still a long ways away from hurricane season. Well, not a long ways away, but we are still a long ways away yet, relatively speaking, until we have to face that problem. But in light of everything that's going on now, of course, with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, of course, that's a pretty big situation going on, and with the upcoming hurricane season, obviously, it doesn't really get any better. Obviously, nothing going out here today. The Eastern Pacific season is actually about a month away from starting. It starts before the Atlantic on May 15th. Of course, the Atlantic Basin starts on June 1st, so we are Nearing that time, about 60 days out to the start of the Atlantic hurricane season, and almost about 30 days until the Pacific hurricane season starts, the Eastern Pacific. Taking a wide shot, this is from tropicaltidbits.com. Obviously, the front that passed through Florida a couple days ago is sitting right here with the trailing cold front, a little bit of a low pressure system here, trying to develop into somewhat of a subtropical system. I've seen a couple of tweets and posts about that. However, it is looking a little bit on the unlikely side due to a bunch of combinations. Obviously, this dry air that's feeding into it, so certainly that's not going to really help this large, expansive dry area right there. And you also do notice that we have another storm system gathering up here across portions of the plains, and that will kind of eject off towards the north and east over the coming days and provide some much needed rain across portions of this area. Well, not really much needed, but some decent rain. Florida got some little itty bits of rain here in the peninsula. We really could use it. A lot more of that, that's for sure. You do also notice the strong upper level winds kind of cutting across this region. That is typical for this time of year. That very strong wind shear here. And if we're taking a look here at the North Atlantic wind shear, you do notice that a lot of this is in the 60 knot range. So this is pretty unfavorable for development. The only really favorable areas up in this developmental area with this cyclonic flow right now that's coming around this low pressure system. So certainly we're watching this area for some attempt at development, but certainly not really looking for anything. Just a reminder, we do have our weather station that is always going to be up and running during hurricane season, and obviously we do hope to get this at a little bit better of a pinpoint accuracy this year. We do hope that we can start using a lot more equipment. There is a lot more equipment on the way that we're going to be hoping to use, so that's certainly going to require some ingenuity and certainly some further developmental research and whatnot. But we'll continue to kind of keep tabs on this. Again, this is the first installment of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion, or the off-season edition. Hope you guys stay safe with this whole pandemic thing, and I will see you guys next Thursday.